the stars be with you.
All right, I'm so happy to welcome back my special guest this week, Lisa Allen. Thank you so much for being here.
I am so happy to be back. Yay!
Yay! And Lisa's a local here in San Diego, and she was on a previous program when we talked about the lunar eclipse in Aquarius. So we'll catch up on that, of course. But Lisa, for those who didn't get a chance to listen to that episode, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello. So I'm Timing Magic is my website, and I have been an astrologer studying since 1993, professional since 2000, and I'm also a tarot reader, and I am a trained herbalist also, and I got more into the healing part of the practice also. But I found out that my true gift about why everybody comes to me is timing of things, and even to change timing if it needs to be changed. So
well, that speaks to the Capricorn.
That's why I have the timing. So, and then I have a book coming out with Llewellyn on timing. I have a book contract, and it's supposed to be out in 2020. It does not have a title yet. So.
Well, there's
always an adventure. There's plenty of time.
Plenty of time. Well, we say that now, but Saturn will sneak up on you and you'll be like, what?
Actually, I've been loving Saturn and Capricorn. And let me tell you, as a quadruple Capricorn, I've been waiting for this.
Yes, this is your moment.
This is my time.
Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's so exciting. I can't wait for when that comes out. And it's no wonder that you are looked for timing, being that super cap,
Yeah. Well, and I thought about this for a long time, but it just didn't come together. Of course, that's part of Saturn, is like making it come together. And I was really frustrated with myself at one point, and it came to me that no, actually nobody's really ready for this book yet. So that's why you were delayed, because if you would have launched it too early, it would just get lost. So I was like, oh, okay. So now it's going to be a thing that people actually are open to, not only understanding how they can, help their timing out, but also to be able to measure it psychically, as well as, because the psychic information, if you will, comes from this place of no time, when people are just straight psychic, or if they're doing tarot, they get an idea maybe, but it's not narrowed down. We do have in astrology, luckily, we do have a little bit better timing skills.
Yes.
Usually. And astrology helps me immensely with that. Okay. Just to let you know. But it can be a period of 2 years or something, you have a Pluto transit. So for the next 2 years, well, you don't know the actual trigger points unless you look at when the moon is coming around or something else, that triggers it. Horary astrology is amazing for timing, but it's very detailed and very rigorous, in its rules.
It is.
So I tend to do my timing with a pendulum and just ask, and then reverse engineer it and look up oh, it's this day. And then I look up and,
your planetary guide.
Oh, Jupiter's going direct, or, something like that.
Well, then you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, basically, and you kind of start there. And Lisa, I find it appropriate if, the book coming out in 2020, what if it just happens to line up with that Saturn-Pluto conjunction?
Oh, I definitely thought of that.
Yeah.
Actually, aren't all three planets together? Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto? Aren't they all three coming together?
They are. I think the Jupiter...
2021? I
want to say the Jupiter-Saturn is going to be on 0 degrees Aquarius. I could be wrong about that, but I think so. But when Saturn and Pluto happens... at least on that first connect, there's a lot there. There'll be, I just looked at this recently, but there'll be Mercury there. The sun is right on top of it when it happens. There will be a pile up.
Wow.
So, so it'll be a potent year.
That will be, especially for me, having most of my planets in Capricorn and Aquarius. My goodness.
So it sounds rather well-timed, Lisa, should I say?
Yes. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
And Spirit has its own ideas. So, you can only change the timing within the bounds of, astrology, because it's actually a reflection of what we're doing. I mean, a lot of people think the planets cause our actions. No, they definitely generate, an energy and influence, but we are the ones, because the whole universe is inside of all of us, right? That's what the birth chart is.
Yeah.
And so it's what we do with it. But when we're not conscious, we're pretty predictable.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Well, and that's a perfect way to lead into what we are going to be talking about today. And that is our topic of catching up with Pluto. So if we talk about that unconscious, so predictable. I know. And I'm so happy with how last week's episode turned out with Cassie and Neptune. And we have a very Plutonian signature going on this week. And yeah, so I thought it was perfect. And I know Lisa and I, it's, me being the Cancer Cap moon and Lisa having all that Capricorn planets, we have definitely been in Pluto's crosshairs
definitely
for a little while now. Yes, so we have some personal insight to share of what that journey looks like. So let's start with recapping, what have you encountered or noticed, or any anecdotes since the last time we talked with the lunar eclipse in Aquarius?
Oh, I will say that for me, I have my moon in Leo, okay, and Venus and Saturn in Aquarius. They weren't exactly aspected, although the lunar eclipse did get very close to the moon opposition, okay, for me. So I thought that would affect me a lot. I felt, though, that like most of the stuff started shaking up from the prior solar eclipse in Cancer, oddly. Yes. And it's not aspecting anything really, but I noticed that that's when I changed my business name. I had like total downloads of like, here's how your business is going to look. Here's what you need to do to, change everything. And I'm like, okay. And so during the lunar eclipse was when I was actually starting to get the pieces to, actually see, hey, timing magic is available, better buy it, then like point it to my website, then change all my social media, so I was looking at my calendar before we were talking today, and I'm just realizing that my business model is changing inside out. And not only that, but my payment method has also changed because of PayPal having the terms of service and the terms of use significantly changed for me, despite the fact that I've had the account since 1998 and not even one complaint. Okay. And I felt that what they're doing, and I get it, they're trying to protect themselves from people that do services that they get a lot of refund requests.
Oh, okay.
And I'm just in one of those kind of risky businesses is the way that they're looking at it. So that what they wanted to do was hold my money that I would make for 30 days. 30 days. Who does that?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I need a different payment method here. So I changed my method of collecting money, and also like having like a signature with a terms of service on the receipt that comes to the client. I'm using Square and the appointment system, which is free except for like 2.75 or 3%.
Oh, yeah. There's always a merchant service fee.
I don't care. That's good. I always had that with PayPal. So yeah, it's just fine. So, it came into the money thing. So, that's a Pluto theme sometimes. I had to structure my entire business model.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, almost, and
if you think about it, Lisa, if we because essentially that lunar eclipse in Aquarius, it is apexing the solar eclipse. It's taking that energy and then moving it towards the energy of the signature of that lunar eclipse. And in whole signs, that would be the solar eclipse would have happened in your second house. If you think about that,
yes,
Cancer, right? Because you that the Gemini rising, so maybe that was like uprooting, that whole system and how you take money from other people, that Pluto in the 8th house and changing all that around. And it makes so much sense with all the retrogrades that you were doing all this behind the scenes work, kind of get yourself set up and just reallocate everything. And so I think that's rather perfect way of using the energy.
It was. I'm not done yet. Okay.
Oh,
I have like a gazillion things on my to-do list still, but And luckily we do have Virgo energy now, so that, you know, we can get it done. Like, you know, Sun in Virgo, Mercury just arriving in Virgo, which is like, yes. And then we have, like, I mean, I realize that for some people, these are like, you know, I imagine some of the Pisces and Gemini people are not having as much fun with, you know, some of the transits with that. But the Capricorn is having a really good time with this.
Yes. Well, because we're finally getting things moving here, and that's really what I'm noticing.
Oh my gosh.
Is that
absolutely.
we're finally going somewhere, wherever that place may be. At least we're moving. You know?
Yes. I think that being stuck is eternally worse, really.
Yeah, it is. It can be, for sure. But it was a necessary stuck that we had to go through in order to do, you know, renovate what it is that we're, you know, aligning our ambition towards. So you know, it had to happen. And I think this week, because we're obviously recording this a little early because we got to do that in order for it to come out on time. But the week that we're talking about, we have so many trines and sextiles going on between the Sun and Mercury, and all that action in Capricorn, you know, some Pluto, which is of course what we're going to talk about here. So I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for movement this week and change. Whatever that may look like for you.
I think you're right. And I think that it'll even get more like, because we haven't been in the new moon yet of Virgo, I think it's going to really push stuff forward. And that's when all of the aspects are happening is right around the new moon. And then we have Venus going into Scorpio. And so we have like, I think that there's a lot of movement toward things. Like, you know, where you have like all of the ideas and maybe you have some progress and now it's just time to complete it. And it feels like, for me, I want to complete it before Venus goes retrograde in October.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's my goal.
Well, and you know, Mercury's moving super fast right now. It's going to be whizzing through Virgo. You know, I think we are ready for that. You know, like this is kind of going to be like just a burst of energy until we do hit that second retrograde, which will slow down certain areas of life, but not all, because, you know, it's only Venus this time.
It's only Venus.
It's not the pile.
Well, Mercury will be on its tail, but at least not really at the same time.
Yeah.
It'll be better. It'll be better than the summer. Absolutely.
Yes.
Summer was harsh.
It was, but like I said, it was kind of necessary.
It was.
Well, what I noticed, you know, as you just said, you know, now that we have Venus, because by the time anybody listens to this, Venus will be in Scorpio, the new moon will have happened and we'll be there. But, you know, with Venus and Mercury moving into Scorpio and Virgo, respectively, we don't have much, you know, we're on this little piece of time where we don't have as much we don't have fire per se, and not too much air, although I know Mars is moving back into Aquarius here shortly as well. So it does that this week too. So we're kind of overlapping, but we have a lot of earth and water is basically what's happening right now. Mud. We're building that foundation.
Exactly. And I was just thinking about, like, you know, how probably the fire and the air signs are not as happy right now.
Yes, that's
like,
true.
I am like, yes, I can get something done. I feel like that there's some substance to like jump off of, you know. That's something like, you know, Capricorns, like we like being up high, but like you always notice there's a mountain or something that they're standing on underneath. Right?
Well, and we're looking for the next one to climb, essentially.
I know.
That's
what I'm doing right now. Hopefully, you know, my whole business remodel, you know, my cyber remodel is going to be that. So I'm just, you know, excited about that. Yes. And especially when the book comes out, I think that that'll be a really solid step also, you know, for the Capricorn.
For the Capricorn, yes. I think it'll be wonderful. And so, you know, essentially you were setting up a lot of that with that solar eclipse in Cancer where we had our Pluto opposition. And kind of like what I wanted to point out is, you know, we had that Pluto opposition to the sun and the moon for that solar eclipse. But now we have this new moon in Virgo that we just went through, that we are now having the sun and the moon the moon trines Pluto, you know, every couple times a month. But the sun essentially is trining Pluto to kind of move forward, you know, whatever we were confronted with, or, you know, with that solar eclipse. So I feel like whatever, was kind of breaking down, or we had to deal with, that beast within, we had to deal with to some extent.
Yeah.
Now we're kind of flowing with it, understanding it, being able to move with it a little bit more. Would you say the same, Lisa? I know you have that aspect in your chart, right?
Well, not only an aspect in my chart, I literally have that natally where I have the sun and Mercury, although my Mercury is retrograde, trining Pluto retrograde, but the signs are reversed. So the Pluto is at 14 Virgo retrograde. Then I have Mercury at 16 Capricorn retrograde, and then the sun is at 10. Well, and if you want to count the south node at 11, and Mars at 20. So, I have a lot of Capricorn.
Yes.
So, I am liking this whole trine, and then like even sextile to Jupiter and Scorpio. Yes. I think that that's a really, that's a very good thing. So I'm kind of looking forward to this, all of the trines and some of the stuff like actually working for a change. Okay.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you say that, Lisa, because, you have that aspect in your chart where the sun does trine Pluto. And I feel like I have this theory that I've noticed with the planets, because sextiles and trines, they're considered benefic. But essentially they just create opportunities for something, or something just begins to flow. And so if the opportunity is good and the flow is good, then we're feeling good about it, right? But and so you have that sun Pluto trine. Now here for me, I have a exact sun Pluto square, including the moon. Wow. A nice T-square between them all. So what I notice when trines come around for me, as much as I want to be like, yeah, I'm ready to flow with it, it usually is flowing, but in my own chart, there's tension there. So it can bring about something very easily that causes me tension,
Right. Okay. So, trines are not necessarily good. It just means that there's flow, but it can be too much or not in balance or some other way. And in fact, my own sun trine Pluto, I can tell, and even Mercury trine Pluto, I can tell you that what that means for me is that I usually have a very intense communication, and how I am, I come off people just don't. I remember years ago when I was looking into modeling and acting, and I remember doing an audition, and I was trying to do the girl next door, or the mom, that feeds everybody and all of these kinds of things. And it just came off with me looking plastic and really. But when they put me in a drama position and said, okay, talk to this person, they, totally stole from you and ripped off your life. And so the actor was there that was supposed to be the guy that ripped me off or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I read the lines and I just delivered them. And even he got scared of me.
Pluto came to life.
Pluto was on Donkey Kong.
Yeah, that's funny.
So I do have I'm a nice person and stuff, but I think that there is an intensity when I open my mouth. There's times that, it's just too much for people, but it's not too much for me. I've got the trine.
Yeah. You're I'm just flowing with it. What's the problem?
Myself. Yeah. And the more that I'm myself, I actually have to say that the more that I'm myself, because I do get having 7th and 8th house stuff, I am aware of other people and how that affects them. But when I get over my stuff and I do the Jupiter and Aries, okay, and trining my moon in Leo, things just open up. So I am really aware of, how intense that I can be.
Yes. And being okay with that too, because like you said,
at this point in my life, yes. I think that it was harder to own when I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's much, much better when you're well over 50. It's much better.
Well, good. Well, since we're talking about, because I had a couple episodes ago where with Mars Gradiva, where we just went into a little spiel about Pluto, because he was born during Pluto in Scorpio, and I have a Pluto in Libra, and you're a Pluto in Virgo, and so we don't get to talk about that too much. Do you have any just insights to what Pluto in Virgo looks like? for you, or like what you think?
I will tell you that, I mean, and what I did was when I first started studying astrology, because I was a youngin', you know, with a room full of Pluto and Leo folks, I can tell you there was a huge difference between the Pluto and Leo feel and Pluto and Virgo. I really felt that a lot of people that were, and I am so grateful for the Pluto and Leo folks paving the path. Okay. So this is a good thing. But what I noticed was that they were focused on themselves and healing themselves. And like, what about my, you know, arrangement? What about my this? And, you know, like there was a lot of that. I noticed that the Pluto and Virgo, and even the Pluto and Libra folks, were more about like, how do we help, like, how do we serve others? How do we like, and then like with Pluto and Libra, how do we do this in relationship? How do we like balance this out in the world? And I think that the emphasis of all of that, along with, you know, maybe the internet growing and things like that, like now everybody has access to this. When I started, that was not the case. And I felt like I was in a secret club.
Yeah.
You know?
And now it's everywhere. And that's what Cassie and I were talking about in the last episode, how much everything's rising up and not so much.
I actually think that overall it's good. I mean, true. What happens is that then we need discernment to, you know, clear the chaff, if you will, from the kernels of goodness. You have to clear away a lot of stuff that, you know, like I noticed that people that are not even astrologers are using astrology for their, you know, like promoting their business and getting clients, and they're not even astrologers. They're, you know, tarot readers, they're Reiki practitioners, they're whatever. And they're like, hey guys, you know, Mercury's in Virgo. So, and they talk about it, you know, and they're not astrologers, but it's interesting to me that like they're using that. Like it didn't used to be like that. It used to only be astrologers that would talk about stuff like that. And it's very interesting. I'm glad that like the lingo, if you will, is more accessible to people now.
Yeah, it's very much so. Like so we talked about a lot about this in the last program, of just that exact thing, because, you know, I was likening it to Neptune and Pisces and how a lot of people are coming to spirituality in droves, and astrology basically kind of can fit in there because it's a way of connecting with that bigger picture and that kind of that spiritual energy. And so, people, like you said, like the language is being, you know, more widespread. It's still very much a specialty because, you know, as we know as astrologers, there's a lot to it, and there's many facets, and there's many types of astrologers. And so, but to even have that, people like bringing that in with different disciplines, it's nice as long as, yes, I do.
Yes, indeed. And knowing the difference between like you know, I guess that, you know, maybe the next level of education is to educate potential clients, okay, meaning everybody's clients, like what the actual, like, you know, how astrology really works, and, you know, what the difference between somebody who is doing Reiki and some of those things honestly needed in the world. Okay. But when they think that they can read a chart, then it, you know, it's like, okay, you know, now you need an astrologer, okay, or you need some kind of background. So the education piece, I think, is one of the next things that will come, but I'm glad that it's even a conversation now. We may have to wait till, you know, maybe that Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter conjunction to like really get the education part locked in.
Like the credentials and stuff like that.
Like meaning the Saturn and Jupiter joining together, because Jupiter meaning, you know, the higher education, and then Saturn being like, you know, hey, do you know how to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's so funny with our Pluto and Virgo here, you know, because Virgo, you know, speaks to skill, right?
Yes.
You know, well, and
I did notice that it was like, with the Pluto and Virgo generation coming into the astrology world. And I was a single mom at the time when all of this was happening, you know, back in the day. So I didn't get to, you know, I guess do like some of the real reflective astrology stuff until even after my kids got older and, you know, some of that. But I lived a lot of it. So what happens is that when you become a professional, you tend to live out a lot of your transit. Okay, so when you look at your own chart and you go, oh, there's this transit, you tend to live it out through your clients and helping them through something rather than happening to you and that you have to do it. That's what I've noticed is a huge thing after going pro.
Yeah, no, I know. Sometimes it will surprise me, the people that come to me and I'm like, oh, universe.
and did you look at your own, like, well, sometimes you can just look at the transits and, you know, I mean, I find that you know a lot about what kind of questions are going to come up when you see on the calendar next week that Mercury is going direct or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, oh, yep, that's going to be a communication issue. Like, you don't even have to look at their chart to see what's going on. Like, you already know, like, what it is. And then when you apply it to them, you go, oh, yep, there it is. I mean, you can see, oh, yep, that's hitting your moon. Oh, that's hitting your Mars. That's hitting your... And I find that the ones that really hit more are the ones on the personal planets, because that's when people they feel personally, you know, involved in it at that point. Like if something is hitting their Uranus, not so much, not as much.
Yeah. No, it has to get personal in order for you to like really,
it does
really feel it. And so I find people will come to me, you know, if we're talking about Pluto here, people come to me a lot of times with Pluto issues because I have been through, you know, I have a birth chart that is very Plutonian.
Yeah.
And I also have gone through a slew of Pluto transits. Lucky me.
Yeah.
So,
where I have the trine, okay, the sun trine Pluto, I do need to probably tell you that I am also Plutonian, like on the moon level, and the moon Pluto, that is some deep stuff.
I'm telling you about it.
There's a book on it called The Hades Moon. Okay. If anybody has moon and Pluto or moon and Scorpio or, you know, the squares or anything with moon and Pluto, you guys need to get The Hades Moon. It is mind-blowing. You will get so deep into like what that's about. You will go like, oh, I thought I was crazy. So what I have is a moon semi-sextile Pluto, exactly, because I have 14-degree moon and 14-degree, like, you know, like, but they're one's in Leo, one's in Virgo, but they also are parallel. So it acts like a conjunction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have my own Pluto stuff. Believe me. Believe me.
That's why. Well, that's
but it's
why
more related to the moon. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
More related to the moon than it is the sun for me.
Yeah. Luckily, I was born with the T-square 16-degree sun, opposite a 16-degree moon. It's all square a 16-degree Pluto.
Wow.
So I can definitely speak on it for sure.
Yeah, you can.
And so I, you know, like let's talk about Pluto in general. For those who are listening that are like, wait, what does this mean for my chart? You know, like what is Pluto? What am I looking out for here? Because Pluto, you'll know when you find it. But it might take a while for that, because essentially, you know, the idea of Pluto is you know, we talk about death, rebirth, you know, things along those lines. But most often it's like a psychological death that needs to happen when we have Pluto in our chart, or Pluto transits that, you know, hit parts of us that, you know, need to crumble. Like they're parts of our identity, you know, how we define ourselves as people, that when a Pluto transit comes around, or we have Pluto work to do in our charts, basically, you know, whatever we're propping up ourselves up against, you know, or whatever mask we're wearing to society, is like, guess what? That's not you anymore. You can't like rely on this facade. And so that's kind of that's where it all kind of starts, right, Lisa?
Yes, no, absolutely. I was just thinking about, they were not kidding when they call that an ego death. That is absolutely what happens with Pluto. Pluto's goal, okay, where like, you know, Saturn is about building, and then we have Uranus that is about freedom, and, you know, like even though there's structure with you know, with Uranus, it breaks all structure that is like eliminating freedom, and it wants higher growth and all of this type of stuff. Neptune is just like, hey, let's all go back to the source, right? Pluto has more of this purification, like to be where it literally puts you in the fires of the layers of Hades and you burn off all your layers. Okay, you literally are in the incinerator because of whatever is inside of you that needs to be purified out. And so like Pluto will just burn everything away until it gets that little nugget that's not pure, you know. How painful is that? Yes, it's painful. Sometimes it is painful. When you come on the other side of the Pluto, like after the purification though, it's like, it's kind of like the lead to the gold. It's like, whoa, you know, you get supercharged. And that's where the power, I think, comes from Pluto.
Yes, absolutely. And because that's, you know, Pluto is associated with power. And I think the hardest part of Pluto transits and going through kind of those Plutonian, you know, experiences in life is that it does bring you down to those gates of Hades. And we have to kind of sit into that muck and bring it up to the light. And the only problem is in order to get that power and get that buried treasure, because essentially Pluto has a treasure that if we can just get to it, we can unearth. But what can happen a lot of times in Pluto transits is when you hit rock bottom, when you get there, it still takes a lot of energy to come back up. And some people don't make it, you know, like that's thing. And it will break them. And we don't want that. We want to make people aware of what that process looks like, because really the power is on the other side of it. And if you could just push on through and
like once you get your nuggets, you still have to crawl back out to the tunnel and and
out of the rabbit hole, essentially.
Out of the rabbit hole.
You have to, that's the thing is like Pluto's interesting because you have to kind of volunteer to some extent to go in. Like that's
in a way, I guess that when you choose the kind of birth chart that we have, it's a volunteer mission. You know?
Well, you end up volunteering in a forceful way because
sometimes, I mean, everybody does by transit, but I think that people that have Pluto with personal planets, especially the moon, okay, like that one is a hard one. Venus is a hard one too, and the sun, okay. Those are also difficult, but the moon, I think, because of our safety needs, I always look at the moon as like, you know, if we don't get our safety needs met, like you can't live out the rest of your chart. So when you have Pluto with your moon, it's like, you just feel paralyzed, you know, like you feel like, okay, I'm never safe, you know. And I remember I made a lot of mechanisms as a young kid with feeling safe in order for me to function. And how that worked for me, oddly, I mean, this is weird, but I guess having Moon and Leo trining Jupiter, I learned how to perform to make it look like everything was okay. And then, you know, and of course my mom is like, you know, oh, Lisa's so cool or whatever, you know, because I'm doing good in school and whatever, you know, but like I knew there was something wrong at the core, and I didn't know what that was for a really, really, really long time. And so then even like once I got relationships to start working, because my first my first marriage with the kids was like utterly a disaster and very Plutonian. Okay. He had moon opposite Pluto. That'll tell you a lot. So the lessons that came from that really helped me to choose a partner that would be good. And I still didn't understand the full dynamic of what it was that was in my, like, oh, by the way, I should probably tell you, Pluto's in my 4th house. So it was like ancestry and roots and the, you know, you think some things are normal, but they're not. So that's where it came in. There's some places with Pluto wherein you realize, oh my gosh, like maybe as a young child that like when your parents beat you or something that that that's wrong, even if you can't get help, but you realize it's wrong. Okay. When it's subtle and you don't see the things, like, it looks like, oh, wow, we have the house, we have, like everybody has a job, everybody pays bills, but what's wrong here? Like, that something's wrong and you don't know what it is. And it took me like well into my 40s before I figured it out. And I was really actively doing this by my Saturn return when I had an awakening. So,
Yes. Well, because like you said, like, okay, especially being at the bottom of the chart, the fourth house, and we're talking about Pluto being essentially the unconscious drive that lives within us that we're trying to bring to the light in order to understand the Plutonian issues. Yours is buried down in there. So it doesn't surprise me that, like, it was more like a sensing of something isn't right more than,
absolutely
fully aware.
Yeah, because everything externally, and the Capricorn part of me, and the Virgo, like, and all of that, like, it was totally looking for the physical clues of, like, things that, like, an outward expression of this, and it wasn't. It just wasn't. But what had happened was I realized that there was a lot of trauma modeling and particularly in my mom's family, which I thought was interesting, because you would think that it would be your dad, like, being in the fourth house. And by the way, I'm using classical astrology there. But I also have the moon Pluto. So I see, okay, yeah, it's my mom. I could see where it would be a lot of my mom's. Maybe I have a lot of stuff with dad's stuff too, and I just haven't dug that out yet. I'm still waiting for the Irish citizenship, right? So that'll be my next project. but I'm looking more forward to that, because the sun being trine Pluto, I think that there's going to be more gifts and not as much work.
Yes.
The sun can resonate with, as the sun can resonate with father, and the moon with mother. So I have the harder aspects with Pluto with the moon. And I have the trine with the sun. So I think that if I was doing the father line, I think that it'll be a little easier.
Yeah, that would make sense. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel you on all that.
Definitely. Yeah.
And especially having just gone through a moon Pluto conjunction opposite the sun, where my Pluto and all that type of stuff. I found it was a difficult last couple years for sure, that I went through. And one of the things with Pluto is essentially what it does, because I was talking about those like identity props, or, that have like that ego death that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it also brings up, if we're talking about unconscious material or like kind of unconscious motivations that we don't really challenge or even see within ourselves. I noticed that Pluto tends to, when it comes around, it's like, it looks at what you're attached to, and it's like, really? And why?
Oh, I know.
Why are you attached to that? How about if I take that away? Like, how do you feel after that? Or like, can you get along without that? And we all know we can, but we identify, it's back to that identity and what we identify with. And we don't really know what that is completely until something is taken away from us. And that's why there's a lot of, grief that can come along with Pluto, and why it's associated with that death, or, because it can be literal death. Most often it's more psychologically based, but yeah. So, what are you attached to? And
yeah. Yeah. And actually on the note of Pluto transiting, when it went over my son, and of course there was a lot of other transits that were happening, not only for me, but for my spouse, who passed away. But I can tell you that when Pluto was on my son, at the same time, Uranus was like going toward his ascendant and in Aries. And so I'm like, wow, our relationship is going to change. Okay. Like, I didn't realize it would be through literally physical death that would happen. So yeah, Pluto just doesn't take any crap. Honestly,
it doesn't.
If you are attached to and I didn't think that would be how that would happen. You know what I mean? Like, I thought I'll just let go. And, one thing I learned about Pluto, let go. Okay.
Yes.
Everything. And the part that I took for granted was that he would be alive.
Yeah.
That was the part I took for granted, and especially at the time, when it seemed like he was healthier than I was. Like, I was the one that was like suffering a lot of health problems. And so, it didn't make any sense at all. At the time. It does now. Like, I see like, oh, okay, our relationship does evolve, but you're in a different, the other dimension.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what happens. And that's when he was messing with my, the headphones,
the earbuds. Yes.
The earbuds and earrings, and likes to play with that stuff. And I know he's around.
Yes. That's so sweet. It's luckily I haven't had I probably should knock on something. I haven't had to deal with a whole lot of
crack. I'll knock on
death.
it for you.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I say that, but that's not true because, I've come to an age where now I'm starting to see it, I've dealt with it a little bit here and there. Like I lost one of my best friends who happened to be a 72-year-old woman, passed away as my Pluto transit was starting, and, she lived a good life. So it wasn't like it was necessarily, we were all sad to see her go. She wasn't quite old enough for us to be like, okay. But, that was like that first inclination. I'll have dreams about her from time to time and she'll come to me and she's awesome. And then, I've noticed a lot of friends. I actually had a friend who passed during two friends right before the solar eclipse in Cancer, to the opposite to Pluto, and one right after it. And so, it just reminds us of like, what we're attached to, what we might take for granted too, like you were saying, like he seemed healthy to you and like you wouldn't know that he could be gone in a second. And so I know Pluto isn't necessarily always associated with like maybe appreciating what you have and while you have it, but I'm just going to throw it in there because,
I appreciate, well, the one thing I don't regret is that I did appreciate every single day that we had. I just didn't realize that it was like, okay, 10 years, no more. Okay. Like I didn't realize that there was a deadline on it and there was no way to know that. I mean, like even people that were psychic were like absolutely dumbfounded when it happened. So it was so cloaked from my knowing.
Yes. Right? Well, that speaks to Pluto again.
But I also realize, Mel, that, not everybody in life gets an opportunity to be with that kind of love ever, like in like 100 gazillion years. And I had it for 10 years and I'm very grateful for that.
Oh, that's beautiful, Lisa. Yes.
It's true.
It is. Well, okay. And so because Pluto has that, it brings us to those depths, we have to possibly grieve over what we've lost. We have to maybe deal with guilt about something, or if
I was very happy to be guilt-free in this. Like it literally was just a shock, but like, I know there was nothing in the entire world that could have been done to be different. And it was even interesting because like when it happened, like, we said we loved each other, like, and hugged and kissed before I went in the shower, And, I don't have like on that level, I don't have any regrets. Like it's not like, oh man, I never told him or, oh my, this and that, and the other. And not only that, but I can still talk to him, the way that I look at this. And I remember even being in the hospital, when all of this, the resuscitation efforts were happening and there was no way, because the aorta split and it just filled up the heart. So like they didn't know this at the time. So they were trying to save him. And then like I realized he wasn't going to be saved. Okay, that hurt. But when I went into, so they said you can go into the room to like say goodbye and whatnot. And when I was in there, I mean, his body was there, but he wasn't there. Okay, he wasn't there. And so I said, oh, he's not here. Okay. And I was going to leave and they said, wait, like, are you going to say goodbye? I'm like, he's not here. And they were like, of course he is. Like, you're his wife. And like, of course he's here. Like, all of this stuff. And I'm looking at them. I'm like, no, he's not, So turns out, okay, that night I was actually supposed to be reading at a psychic fair. By the way, this is at Samhain time, okay? So like we have the Halloween theme going on here of the veils, okay?
Yes.
So one of my psychic friends that actually knew him, okay, she was working and I was supposed to be working with her. And it just so happened to be the night that Ray passed. She knew it ahead of time because Ray came to her to help her do the psychic readings. And so when she called me after the event, she goes, I know what happened. Like he came here and he helped me do all the readings. I'm like, oh, that's where he was.
He's like priorities. I'm already
priorities. Like I gotta help Stephanie.
Help other people.
I gotta help Stephanie tonight because I'll get back to you. and it didn't hurt my feelings. It wasn't like, it wasn't weird that way. In fact, it just told me what a bond that him and Stephanie had in a soul way, because in real life they only met for like 5 minutes. But she knew him immediately. They both like came to me and said, oh my God, the other person, like they were like so excited that they got to meet in 3D for 5 minutes. And
yeah,
pretty intense stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
speaking of which, I'm sure that the myths of death, etc., have to do with Pluto, and I'm hoping that we can get to the mythology.
Yes, I wanted to share some of the mythology, but what I just wanted to bring up real quick when we talk about guilt, because Pluto can be associated with that guilt, resentment, anger, rage that lies within, and there's many different ways to get to that Pluto transit. And yes, you were able to make peace with it, but when I'm thinking of like my friend who had passed that I just spoke of right before the solar eclipse, he actually was hit on his motorcycle by a 17-year-old girl who was driving with a car full of people at 3 a.m.
Wow.
And had ran a light. And so immediately I think of her, if we think about guilt, because I'm sure she didn't mean to do that. It's just as tragic that he was lost. And it's just as tragic that this young woman has to deal with the repercussions of, the unconscious that is going to come to her to deal with. And so that's part of it too. Like, there's many facets to get to that Plutonian, and then having to get back out of that and to go there, feel it, because we have to feel it with Pluto. Otherwise it doesn't go away. It'll bury itself and create a bigger unconscious problem in the long run. And so we can talk about that a little bit later, like how to deal with it.
Yeah. No, I would say that the more you can go into feeling and the more that you can let go that is the way to navigate Pluto. Absolutely.
Yes. You gotta, it's an honoring of sorts. You kind of have to honor the,
it's like you are the universe and this little piece of speck of nothing all at the same time. And it's going to be purified to the absolute elemental level.
Yes.
Like it's not going, there's no room with Pluto. There's no room for anything impure. There is no room. And it doesn't give a crap about pain.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, let's go into our myths there, because I thought this one's interesting because it touches on what we were just saying there. And this myth of the dark goddess, it's a Sumerian legend. It's it's reputedly the oldest myth in recorded history, supposedly, from what I read. I could be totally wrong, but this I got this myth out of actually an excellent book by called The Gods of Change by Howard Sasportas. I think that's not saying his name right.
Wow, amazing. Cool.
Yeah, and so I highly recommend that book. And I actually have 2 myths to share that I got from that book, but I wanted to start with this one by the Sumerian legend involving Ereshkigal. I think I'm saying that right. Ereshkigal, which was the goddess of the underworld, and her sister Inanna, which was the goddess of the heavens. And so basically, Ereshkigal had lost her husband, and they were going to have a funeral for him down in the underworld. And even though Inanna lived up in the heavens, with her jewels, her fine, didn't have to deal with any of that murky underworld business, she was like, I'm going to go, pay my respects to my sister, right? And so she goes down there, and her sister, being in the underworld, she's kind of filled with rage. Her husband just died. She's actually experiencing labor pains. Like, she's not happy. And, her inner rage is going to take down whoever, encounters her. And so, like all people that have to come into the underworld, Inanna got there and she was stripped of all her, everything, her fine robes, her jewels, down to the bare nudity, because essentially that's what Pluto does. It strips you bare, right?
Yes. Yeah, but I think that it takes your skin off and maybe even leaves your bones, maybe.
Oh, look at that. Well, you're ahead of the story, Lisa.
Oh, well, there you go.
And so, yes, that wasn't enough. And her sister decided to hang her on a meat hook and basically let her rot.
Wow.
And so now she's like super rageful, because not only is her husband dead, she just killed her sister, and she's giving, birth, this extreme labor pain. And so Inanna was smart before she left, because she was like, okay, I don't quite trust my sister. So if in 3 days, she told her servant, for 3 days you don't see from me or hear from me, come after me because something's wrong. And so the servant, tries to figure out what's, how to go best to go about that. And so the servant goes to Inanna's maternal grandfather, whose name is Enki, who ends up sending 2 small figures down to the underworld called the Mourners. And so the Mourners, because they were so small and a little sneaky, they were able to get in without being stripped and having to go through that same process that all people do when they go to the underworld. And so they found Inanna and Ereshkigal, and rather than going straight to Inanna and try to free her or whatever, they went to the goddess of the underworld to give her the opportunity to lament about her pain and the fate that she was in. And basically it was a form of therapy by allowing this woman to just say what she's gone through and why she feels so rageful through the loss. And having honored that life force within Ereshkigal, basically the Mourners won her over, and she's like, well, what can we do for you? And they were like, of course, bring Inanna back to life. And so she sprinkled some magic on her, and then she was able to be just the way she was before, and back at it. But the thing is that there was actually a little twist in the end, and you might find this interesting, Lisa, was that when she was freed from the underworld, basically, if you're freed from the underworld, you have to find someone to take your place. And so the idea was that Inanna had her consort, Tammuz, who didn't really help while she was down there, didn't help in the matter at all. And so now she was basically got back, and she was like, oh, now it's your turn. You've got to go.
Oh,
and
wow.
So what's suggested there is that once you go through that major psychological change of being in the underworld like Inanna was, then your partner has to too, because otherwise the relationship is in danger of breaking down completely, because both people have to be at the same level. So I found that as an interesting twist to the end of that particular myth.
Absolutely, because I don't care how much she looks the same. You're not the same after you go to the underworld. You're just not.
Yes.
And so I find it interesting that 3 days, because that's how long it takes the moon to change a sign too.
Yeah.
So that, 3 days time, it's like, oh, yep, the moon has changed a sign. So, because Inanna, if I'm not mistaken, is also Ishtar and is the goddess of the moon.
Absolutely. You're right about that. She was the earlier incarnation of Ishtar. Yeah. So that's a very astute observation, Lisa. Together, I like that. That makes sense. It speaks a lot to the moon. I'm just going to throw this in here real quick because, when I think about the moon, especially if you're very moon driven, and especially if you're moon Pluto driven, sometimes waiting out the 3 days before you act on things and let things, quell first.
I see that so many times in my timing work, where it's usually 2 to 3 days, like for things that are like, when's the check coming in the mail, and those kinds of questions, or if they're already en route, and the whole energy can change in 3 days time, because as you know, the moon, why do we even deal with calculating the void of course moons? If it's not important, so yeah, I think that that's just very interesting that they talked about 3 days, and it's everything changes in 3 days. It can.
It really can. And what changes most is your emotional reaction and the way you feel. And, I don't think we've said this, even though we've been alluding to it the whole time, but Pluto brings about that deep, unconscious, instinctual, emotional material. That's basically what it's dredging up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the moon is very, it plays its part within that, because yes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And so, it's funny, Lisa, because, things always, being a musician, things always come to me in song. And so as I was putting together all my Pluto notes and stuff, I kept having Devo in my head in the song, I've got an uncontrollable urge. Uncontrollable urge.
Awesome.
That's Pluto.
Right.
Yeah.
And Pluto can take the effect of this, like, kind of destructing, you know, like you're just walking into the pit and sometimes you know it, like, even, and you just can't stop and you got to do it. And,
I know.
you know, like, in that, like, that makes no sense to want to destroy yourself, right? I mean, we think of rock stars often that like destroyed themselves, knowingly destroyed themselves, and they just did it anyway. And what were they after, you know? I realized that they probably numbed the pain out a little bit with, you know, drugs and like other things, in order to be able to like go to those depths. But I mean, they were going to go there, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
I
because, you
think of
know,
that.
well, Pluto also has that, you know, compulsive and obsessive quality to it.
Yes.
And to know when to stop necessarily. And the thing is like the masculine principle is usually how we try to combat Pluto, you know, by fighting against it or, you know, trying
to resist. And
yeah.
that is like, let go. That's the right way, not resist. Resist is not the right way to do Pluto. Oh my gosh, it will tear you. It's like, you're snuffed. Okay. Are you a pile of ashes? Are you going to mess with me anymore? Says Pluto. I mean, it's like, not really.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's true.
Don't do that to Pluto. That is my advice.
Yes. Do not do it, because
let go. It's Pluto's. Let it go. It's like, you know, trust me on this one.
Yeah, I know. I've made that mistake myself, definitely. And
I'm sure with the squares you probably did.
Oh yeah, that's a square is gonna fight, right? Like essentially.
Yes.
You know? I'll do my best.
Tension.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know, well, that's the thing with Pluto too, is it also touches on things like you know, feeling humiliated or being, you know, humiliated in some way. And I think fighting against it just adds more to the humiliation, because, you know, you keep trying and trying and trying, and then it's not looking good.
Not looking good. Yeah.
Not quite looking good, which kind of brings me to my last story, which was part of the same book here. And this is a little bit of a shorter one. And it has to do with the Hercules and his labors with the Hydra. And
well, and I was going to mention that the Ishtar Inanna story is also covered in the Hades Moon book too, really well. Yeah, so
perfect. And I don't have that book, so I'm going to have to get in there.
Girl, that is a must-have for your clients, and especially you having a Moon square Pluto. Yes. I think you qualify. You need that book.
I need that book. So for those who are listening, I'm going to put a whole book list.
Awesome.
Lisa's book, the book I reference, and a few other Pluto books, so that, you know, if you want to go dive into Pluto further, because essentially that's what he is asking to be done. There's some resources that you can turn to. But, you know, the thing with the Hercules and the Hydra, and it's interesting because it's the 8th labor, you know, and Scorpio being the 8th sign. And although I use traditional rulerships, there is definitely a scorpionic vibe that hangs out with Pluto. I'm not going to deny that.
Hades is the god of the underworld, and Pluto being his other name. I would say that you're right about that.
And so before Hercules set out on his 8th labor, a piece of advice was given to him. And it was, we rise by kneeling, we conquer by surrendering, and we gain by giving up. So that was the clue he had to go by in order to defeat the Hydra, the multi-headed beast. And so the Hydra was actually hard to find for Hercules, much like our unconscious, you know, this little idea of Pluto, it lives in this depth that, you know, it takes a while to get to. And it's hid in a cavern of perpetual night, which was in the stagnant swamp. And so he finds I know, right? Very Plutonian. And he finds the Hydra and knows it's in the cave in the swamp. And so he's like, how am I going to get this Hydra out? And so he shoots a couple arrows in there and nothing happens, right? And so he has this idea. He's like, well, I'm gonna add a little flint on there and light these puppies up. And so he lit flaming arrows to light up the cave. And of course, you know, that stirred the Hydra, and she came right out, through the light, you know, that illumination, that awareness. And she came out so that Hercules can essentially confront the beast, because that's a lot of what happens with Pluto is, you know, that confronting of the beast in ourselves or those around us. Because sometimes, you know, it happens with others. And so, you know, he got right in there and he lopped off, you know, a couple of her heads, and But immediately the head would grow back with 3 more. And he was like, I can't keep up with this. He's like, how am I going to, defeat this Hydra? And so he remembers what he was told. And he's like, okay, well, we rise by kneeling, right? So he got down to her level in the murky mud of the swamp, that stagnant swamp. And he was able to bring her, he had to like lift her head up out into the light and then lop it off in order for it not to grow back. And so that was the way he was able to, defeat her, is by getting down to the levels and rolling in the muck and bringing it to the light, cutting off all the heads. And then when all the heads were gone, a 10th head popped up, and he knew that that was a jewel. And so he buried that next to a rock. And it brought something precious in the end. And so the moral of the story basically is if we fester in those stagnant waters and we never move past those unconscious instinctual drives like the Hydra lives in, they can control us, right, Lisa? Because that's...
Yeah. No, and I was just thinking, and where the other example in Nana was the moon, this example, Hercules, I think that it's more like the sun. So that, like we think that our light is going to happen. And actually, interestingly, the light does conquer, but you got to bring it up in the right way so that it can actually work. Like you can't just do it all, because it's their realm, it's their rules. So you got to bring it up to where your rules apply, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, I mean, and then again, the 3, I was like, oh, wow, 3. Okay.
Oh, yeah, because 3 heads grew back. That's interesting.
Not 1. I mean, it could have been just 1 and then 1, 1, but no, it was 3. That's very interesting. It magnifies too.
Absolutely. And yes, so it's just a reminder of like, if we don't get down in there and get to the dark and bring it to the light, those types of things are going to control us. And that's
right. And the fact that think about like the heads multiplying. I mean, if you keep doing it and the heads keep multiplying, you'll never get past it. I mean, like it'll just take you over,
Yeah, and like the severing of the head without the light is basically when you try to push it away, right?
Exactly.
Like, exactly.
Yes.
If I don't look.
Don't let me look at this. Cut.
Yes, exactly.
Or bury it again, or put it back in its cave. Oh yeah, that's gonna work.
Yeah, no.
There's no jewel there, or you don't get any, no reward.
And so we want that reward, right, Lisa? We want that reward.
Apparently, I chose that kind of chart. Yes. You too, apparently. Yes, we want the reward.
And that's kind of what I'm feeling like this week is if we want to bring it full circle to what we dealt with the Pluto opposition, and now we're in the trine, is I feel like we've done a lot of work in that regard. And now maybe that treasure, that buried treasure.
Well, and I was going to say something that I've noticed also, that eclipses can be kind of like gateways for new things to come in and old things to leave, including death and rebirth and or birth. I mean, just, I noticed a lot of people had transitioned around the eclipses. And so the dragon, the dragon head and the dragon tail, being conjunct the sun and the moon, apparently has some kind of an effect with all of this. And then it turns out that we have all of this Pluto stuff this week.
Yes, exactly. And so, so even though our story, kind of took us here and there to the depths, I think like much of what we're encountering now is kind of moving through that and honoring that, because Pluto asks us for honesty and integrity and truth. And that's what that bringing to the light is.
At the purest, like you cannot lie to yourself. Like it is just absolute painful, like everything that you like think that you want to hide from yourself, because it's like, I really don't want to look at that. That hurts.
Yeah.
Pluto doesn't care.
Yeah. Because it was going to continue to hurt until we look at it.
Yes.
So I think a lot of us has been going through some of that. And if you're like me and Lisa, if you have any cardinal signs, especially mid cardinal degrees, if Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, you've probably been on this journey with us.
Yeah.
Or it's coming to you.
I think Saturn coming back to Capricorn, and like when it does make its conjunction later, there's going to be some kind of, I feel like that there's going to be some kind of like graduation, or, some kind of like when it happens for a lot of us. I know that Pluto and Saturn coming together usually is kind of a depressing time. I mean, like, you think of those two energies together and it's like, ew, that's heavy, right?
Yeah.
But if you've done your Pluto work, I think that you get graduated, you somehow, and I think that it could even happen in the real world. Like, you purify yourself enough if you're doing your work with Pluto, okay? And Saturn is also a little workhorse, but wants you to do the physical work, okay? Mm-hmm. So when they come together, I could see like that the whole world at that point could see who's done their work and who hasn't done their work. Because one of the things about Pluto is it's kind of invisible to other people. Like, when you're going through this, it's kind of internal usually.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it seems external because other people may trigger you, but the work is like, you are in the underworld, nobody sees it. I think that when Saturn like will come together with this, I think that there's going to be some kind of like, here's the reward, here's the noticing. And then of course, you probably have to have the sun on it and the moon on it and like other things going on at the same time for all of that to really come. And then it'll be like for the world to see, like other people will be going, wow, you did that, So keep that in mind while you're in the underworld and Pluto, that the reward is coming.
There we go. And I think that's an excellent place for us to end our conversation, Lisa, because a little added bonus on the end there. So now, before we go here, tell us, tell people where they can find you or what you got going on right now or anything.
I'm going to be working at the San Diego Psychic Fair on October 27th, I believe. I'll double check that, but I think it's the 27th. It's a Saturday or Sunday. Let me look. It is a Saturday, October 27th, and it's downtown at 402 Market in the Brokers Building Art Gallery. So that should be fun. It's right by the Haunted Hotel, and so there's going to be probably a lot of people doing, like activities and stuff, and so there's going to be a psychic fair at the same time.
Oh, so fun.
That should be fun. And everything else will be on timingmagic.com. And I have Facebook, Instagram. Most of them are Timing Magic. Facebook, I had to get Timing Magic with Lisa. So, because Timing Magic was taken, but that's okay.
Yeah. With the world of 7+ billion people, it's hard to find anything. That's
speaking of which, so one of my assignments recently from a branding exercise I was going to do was to look you up on Google, right? And I'm like, oh, this should be fun. So what I did because my name is so common, I actually looked up and saw how many Lisa Allens there are, and there's like well over 5,000 in just the USA.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going, So now the next exercise was like, maybe I could figure out like Lisa Allen, San Diego, see what happens, right? I come up, it's a little bit further down. Lisa Allen, astrologer, bam, that comes right up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so if I'm ever looking for someone who does astrology, I'll put astrologer.
You just put astrologer after it, and and usually, and if they have a website and if they're on presence, like if they're actually doing stuff and are on social media and they're doing things, like they'll pop right up.
Yeah.
So
yes, yeah. I guess I was born with a rather unique name, maybe not Melissa, but LaFara.
Yes, and it's awesome. I love your name.
Thank you. So yeah, when you look me up, you'll see things.
It's like your husband should take your name, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny if I ever got married, which I don't know if I will be that person. The very Uranian personality of me is not.
I understand that. I have a sun trine Uranus, and I can relate.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I don't necessarily find it important within relationships, but that could be a whole nother podcast in itself.
That could be a whole nother podcast.
Maybe for another time. So, all right, well, go check out Lisa at timingmagic.com. And of course, I'll have all her information on my blog posts and in my, the things that I share. And in order to get that, where can you find me? Well, you can find me at energeticprinciples.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Energetic Principles, where I have, daily astro alerts that come up and other types of fun things to read and peruse. And if you remember, I mentioned earlier about my Patreon account. So if you'd like to show appreciation for the podcast or sign up for my tarot subscription or the moon horoscopes I write, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/energetic principles. And of course, if you like what you heard here today, and I definitely want to give a big shout out to Chris Brennan, who gave me a shout out.
Yes, Chris, woohoo!
And who brought some people to my podcast, and I'm so grateful for that. So if you're listening from his mention, thank you so much for checking me out, and I'm so glad that you are here. And yes, please spread the word. And last but not least, if you like what you hear, let me know on iTunes, because ratings, they matter, people. So if you want to give me a nice rating, a nice one, please, I would not object. I'll put my Plutonian sword down and let it happen. And so, all right. Thank you again, Lisa. You're always a pleasure to talk to.
Oh, thank you so much for having me again. I hope that I can be one of your regulars or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. I know where and when to call upon you.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find, right?
I love it. Well, thank you again. And thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, may the stars be with you.